First, I'd like to give a very short introduction to Jhampa. He met Venerable Lama Yeshe and became one of his first male Sangha members in 1971. Jhampa studied mainly in Dharamsala, India, learning Tibetan language, studied under His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Kavji Ling Rinpoche, who's His Holiness's senior tutor, and Venerable Geshe Rabten and Geshe Darge. He's one of the first Western practitioners to be given permission by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to teach all levels of Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism. So, Jhampa, welcome to the KTBC Center in Taos, New Mexico.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Good. Sometimes it's funny when you listen to that and you think, is that me? Anyway, so we'll start with some prayers, whatever prayers you'd normally do if you'd like, so we get a good motivation.
Oh, didn't we mark muted?
To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, go for refuge. It might be good if everyone muted themselves so we don't have sort of a cacophony of prayer here. Thank you. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Very good. Oh. So anyway, welcome to the class. Now, the subject is spiritual determination. So I want to start this first with something that's more psychological, and then I'm going to go into the actual presentation. So a lot of the words that we have in Buddhism come actually from, actually more than 100 years ago, and from a set of Jesuit monks that went to Tibet. And of course, they started to create a dictionary, and then Chandra Das, expanded on that and made a big dictionary of Tibetan English sort of words. But the sort of issue is that the translators were Christian, and not that that's a problem, but they were looking at things from a Christian perspective, Christian vocabulary. And so they took the word nejung, which is to mean, well, it means, let's say, ne is place, jung is to arise from a place, okay? And they turned that into renunciation. But the thing is, if you look at it psychologically, then renunciation is I'm looking backwards. So I'm looking back that I renounced alcohol, I renounced cigarettes, I renounced this and that, so I'm that's the thing. So it doesn't really have the connotation of moving forward. And so therefore the translation of renunciation, although sometimes it works really well in teachings, I mean, Lama Zopa Rinpoche uses it quite often, but he also uses spiritual determination. And the point being is that we're going somewhere with ourselves. And that's the thing is we're going for refuge. We're going somewhere. And so therefore, psychologically, the word renunciation really isn't the one that you want to use. Now, having become more enlightened, you may, renounce many things, but the thing is you're not focused on that. You're focused on where you're going with yourself. So for the talk, finding my spiritual determination, and then we said renunciation, really the word renunciation should be taken off. It's not, it shouldn't be part of that. It should be just that I am spiritually determined. Okay, so it's just a comment. There's quite a few words which are badly translated or mistranslated. I'll give you as another simple example is, we often use the word ignorance, like the primary delusion is ignorance, and then there's attachment and aversion. Well, strictly speaking, in the Tibetan language, you don't say ignorance, you say misunderstanding. It's the Tibetan word is rikpa. Rikpa means to understand. Ma rikpa means I don't understand. So we would say, my principal problem is I don't understand. And because I do not understand, then I have my attachments and my aversions. So that it becomes the root. But if you look at the Tibetan word, and that's where it's really actually important, that it's like, I just don't understand. But if I understand, because it's part of that word, then, I understand attachment doesn't work. Attachment is difficult because everything's impermanent, or anger is not the best way to solve our problems. So I think as time passes, and with more modern teachers, and with better understanding of the concepts that the Tibetan, or the word for us, not Tibetan really, it's actually Buddhist, the Buddhist words will be more polished and have a better meaning. And you really have to think of it that this is important. For example, if you go to the dialectic school, I mean, that's the school where the young monks and nuns now, attend the debate, and they learn how to say things properly and stuff. It's very, very strict. I mean, how you formulate a sentence has an impact on how you think. It's sort of, where are you coming from in having said that? So, I mean, the standard example is that, let's say, Fat Fred doesn't eat during the daytime. Okay, so what that automatically indicates is Fred is fat, so he must eat at night. Although you didn't say it, that was the sort of the side meaning to it. So again, if we're talking about our spiritual practice, we want to have the right context, the right words to talk about who we are, what we're doing with ourselves. It's not just a question of like, I've renounced and I'm, this and that. No, I mean, hey, who are you? Where are you going with yourself and such? And that's much more of a Buddhist point of view, that I am stopping my misunderstanding. I am creating a better understanding because I have a spiritual determination about what I want to do with myself and things. Okay, so just starting off with just some thoughts about our language. But what you really need to think about is the feeling that you get, because that's really important. I mean, if the Tibetans, in a dialectic school, didn't put a lot of emphasis on sentence structure, that was not important, then it really wouldn't matter. But they're very, very meticulous about it. In fact, I mean, that's what all the debate is about, saying something with a proper connotation and a proper impact, that you're not sort of inadvertently referring to something else by the one thing that you say. So anyway, I wanted to introduce it with that because we're talking of spiritual determination. And so let's get the context right. We're going somewhere with ourselves. Now, And in the opening prayers, there was a lot of reference to the wonderful Buddha Shakyamuni. And so I wanted to start with that. And why? Because it has to do with motivation. And so for example, in our spiritual determination, motivation is what it's all about. I mean, that's what's creating you day by day. And, I can see that a lot of us are mature Buddhists, at least by age. I don't know how many years we practice, but we're mature Buddhists. And so the thing is, I've seen for myself that if you're not really clear day by day with your motivation, then after some time, your practice becomes flat. And you'd say, gee, I've been practicing for 5, 10, 20 years, yeah, I do my prayers and stuff, but not much is happening. Well, the fault would lie on lack of clarity and motivation. That if you really, clear every morning, you motivate with some clarity. And sometimes it's better not to say prayers because it's so easy just to rattle it off. I mean, I do it in Tibetan, so Sangye Jon and Sangye Jon, I mean, I could carry on for another 15, 20 minutes, but it doesn't mean that I've actually connected with what I'm saying. No. Or even if you say it in English, I go for refuge of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha from now until enlightenment. I work for the benefit of all sentient beings. We always say things so fast. Or then go to mantras. I mean, we are in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, which then includes Tantra. So if you took, for example, the mantra of Vajrasattva, it's Vajrasattva Samayama, Nupaliya, Vajrasattva no Vrajadri, do Mebuwa Sutagayo, Mebuwa Supagayo, Mebuwa. Okay, so if you were saying that, do you know what you're saying? It's actually a love song to the guru. It's beautiful. It's like, please think about me. Please don't abandon me. Please care for me. Please hold me dear. Please help me have a, glorious mind. I mean, this is what it is. So when I teach Vajrasattva, I always say that, the English version, if that's your language, say the English version periodically. So you know what you're doing. It's not just sort of like, and then of course, when you do retreat, if you're trying to do the 100,000 as a retreat, well, it takes 3 months on average, but that's going through it pretty darn fast. You're doing like 1,000 a day, so again, it's sometimes we're in a rush, and that's part of our culture. And sometimes we lose some of the flavor. It's like sitting down to a gourmet meal that's absolutely spectacular, and you just shovel it in your mouth. So sad, I mean, you could sit down and enjoy each part of it. And that's really Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe said, savor the Dharma. It's got flavoring, really enjoy it. Let yourself get into it, and stuff. And of course, check up and think about it. And you always use chocolate cake, as sort of the example. Anyway, so in regards to our prayers, it's about motivation. Now, I want to go back to the original, we'll go back to sort of the source of Siddhartha. Okay, so Siddhartha, of course, is the name we give to the being who incarnated many, many, many rebirths and finally became Buddha Shakyamuni. Okay, so just to have a name for it. So there's various stories of how he generated bodhicitta, but the one that for me that hits me in a more realistic way is this. It's like a long time ago in the continent of India, but during the time of a previous Buddha called Buddha Sound of the Drum, there was a little boy running around in the forest, in the trails, in the jungle and such like that. And he was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and such. And so he came running around the corner, and there's a trail, and in front of him was Buddha Sound of the Drum. And the little boy just looked at him and said, wow, I want to be like that. Because the radiance and the beauty and the peace and the wisdom was just oozing from Buddha Sound of the Drum, And if I think about it, in realistic terms, because he's a child, you might say that went right into the depths of his being. Like it wasn't sort of like a superficial thing. It was like, wow, you are really beautiful. I want to be like you. Okay. And so although it wasn't ritualistic or anything, that was the birth of bodhicitta. That's one of the stories that they shared. There's the other one where he was on a desert island and all these sorts of things, which is fine too. It's a good story. But the one that I want to always find what I can say is realistic ways of thinking about why is the Buddha who he is? How did he become who he is and such? So anyway, so the story goes that he saw many that like, wow. And so you can think of like this incredible being with radiance and just all the qualities went right deep inside of him. You might say, put a light in his heart, put a light in his Buddha nature, you know, or you can even say his soul. I think Bob Thurman recently was having, you know, in some time in the past, had long conversations with the Dalai Lama about the word soul. And although, you know, it's not strictly speaking like, you know, the Christian definition, but in Buddhism, you know, it means, or let's say for us as our culture, it means something. It's sort of the most profound part of myself. But for us, it never had a beginning, never has an end. It's pure nature. It's our Buddha nature. It's our Dharmakaya, however you want to call it. So anyway, so this light of Buddha sound of the ground went boom, and it's like, wow. And you might say that feeling was so strong, or they might, would, you know, we often talk about, you know, having a traumatic childhood and how even when we're 60 years old, it still bugs us, you know, you know, things like that. We have, some of us have those, yeah. Anyway, so how about the reverse of that, that you have this wonderful, blissful experience having seen an enlightened being, and you're only 5 years old, so you're really innocent. You just sort of, it comes deeply into you. Anyway, so then Siddhartha, or the little boy, then the Buddha son of the drum was walking on a path. There's a big puddle. So the boy lied down in the puddle and says, please step on me. Of course, Buddhas don't actually touch the ground. So he was like 1 inch above the ground. So he stepped on top of the little boy, but of course didn't really step on him and stepped over. And then the boy accompanied him to the village, and then they gave teachings. And so then that boy, from that point on, had this feeling in him to be better, just to improve himself, you know, like to be like that wonderful being that he saw, Buddha sound of the drum. So anyway, he went through that rebirth and whatever he did. And then when he died, because he had such a pure feeling in his heart, the next rebirth that came up again. And so again, he improved himself in whatever way was possible. And that's the succession of rebirths. So we, you know, we say 3 countless aeons of rebirths. It really doesn't matter. For me, the point is that just there's a lot of rebirths in there, and each one there's that quality of bodhicitta because of that profound first experience. That's something that's really, you know, venerable. Like it's like, wow. I mean, I can really be devoted, like inspired by that sort of a person. So in talking of motivation, what I want to touch on is that really, like, we can say a lot of prayers, but it's really good to sort of get in touch with your feelings and to sort of really sort of have like a very pure heart with really good intentions to be a benefit for all sentient beings, you know. And I mean, it takes some time to get the qualities about it, but the thing is, it's thing. Then just in regards, because we're talking about Buddha Shakyamuni, you know, that the Buddha is that part of, for, you know, when you look at something, and as we're talking about imagery, that the images actually, you know, give us some information, you know. And I mean, like an example would be is, let's say you have yourself a little Chevy Nova. Okay, so it's mostly got wind down windows and doesn't even have air conditioning, and it's just a little 4-cylinder motor or something like that. You know, so when you see Chevy Nova, okay, it's more or less a car, yeah. Okay, and then you see, you say a Cadillac, okay, you know, and then this, not that it's that's important, but like, you know, oh, you know, really nice seats, air conditioning, cruise control, a really good radio, very comfortable. You know, so you have all of these things. So the image gives you some information. So like that, then when we look at the Buddha, you want to have it that it's got lots of meaning there. It's like, it's rich. It's not like a Chevy Nova. It's the, you know, the highest class of Cadillac that was ever made. And again, just a silly example, but if you think about it, you know, I mean, a car that's got lots of bells and whistles, and you understand that. Whoever, I guess it's Stella, has got her doggy barking. Maybe she should turn off her microphone. Stella, can you hear me? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Or maybe that if whoever's the coordinator of it, just mute her, okay? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's okay. I can talk through a dog barking. Okay. Okay. So so when you look at Buddha Shakyamuni, then what you should see like the example I gave, is this profound millions of rebirths. And when you take it into that consideration, and then you say, okay, well, he definitely had a variety of rebirths that might be very similar to mine, you know? And so when you say like it that way, it's like that, you know, Buddha Shakyamuni, and you look at the Jikata tales. I mean, he was born as a human, he was sometimes married, he was sometimes a monkey, he was sometimes an elephant, he was sometimes a bull, then he was again a human being, you know, lots and lots and lots and lots of rebirths at different things. So if we really take into consideration, you know, millions of rebirths, for sure, at one point he was you, like you know, your life, you know, your state of health, all of those things. And so when Buddha Shakyamuni did become enlightened, it said he could remember all his past lives, you know, spontaneously. It's sort of part of what's supposed to be enlightenment things. So that means he has access to the rebirth that was very similar to yours. And for that reason, then he has empathy. It's not like he looks at you and he appraises you and measures you and says, okay, I think I understand who you are. That's too analytical, that's too intellectual. We're talking about empathetic connection with who we are. So when you look at a Buddha statue, you know, you might say, oh, the Buddha, you know, so wonderful, but put depth to that, put something deeper in that, because it's about spiritual determination. It's about going somewhere with yourself. So give yourself some fuel for that. And one would be inspired by Buddha Shakyamuni, about who he is and what he did over millions of rebirths, and being born as a male, being born as a female, being born as a dog, being born as a monkey, being born as a rabbit, you know, all of these different rebirths, the stories we have. Now, maybe they're just not like Aesop's fables, like to give you some sort of moral, you know, context. But the bottom line is that if we do believe in that idea of multiple rebirths, and the Buddha does become conscious of, an enlightened male or female becomes conscious of their past rebirths, then you could say they look at you, and with their sensitivity of consciousness, it's not like they analyze you, they just empathize and they understand you. They understand what your issues are because they can feel the texture, the nuances of your mind. So when we do talk of taking refuge in the Buddha, I just feel that that's something that's important, that we have that sort of feeling, because it also gives context to what we're doing to ourselves. It's not simply like I'm devoted to the Buddha. No, context of who am I, what am I doing? We are in Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism is working for, you know, to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So how does that happen? It's not like just I become a really nice person, but I never really touch my emotions. No. In each rebirth, I dealt with my emotions. So, you know, and you might be familiar with that. I mean, there's very standard stories of Buddha Shakyamuni, but, you know, one of them, he was a monkey, and he was the king of the monkeys of that particular herd of monkeys. Okay. And so they were living beside the river Ganges, I guess, you know, because he kept rebirthing in the same area. Anyway, and so one day they were on one side of the river, and in the river there was lots of crocodiles. And so that's sort of problematic because they wanted to get to the other side because there's these beautiful mango trees on the other side of the river, but they couldn't do it. So, you know, the on their side, maybe it was a bit of a famine, there wasn't much food. And so the Monkey King, who was the, you know, Siddhartha reincarnated, decided, I want to help my people, you know, so he decided to do something. So he got some vines and tied them all together and wrapped them around his belly and stuff like that. And because he was the, you know, the king, he was, you know, lots of good karma. He had great ability to jump. And so he went way back in his tree and then he ran up and he got all the way over, but he just was enough to grab a branch on the tree on the other side of the river. That's all. So he had to hang there. But he said, okay, quick, everybody cross over me. So it said all the other monkeys, they ran across his back and ran over, and they could eat the mangoes, and all the crocodiles were swimming in the river going like, we want to eat you, but we can't get to you, you know, and you know, so the Monkey King was able to do all of that. And finally, they all got across. And then one of the monkeys was rather competitive, though. Maybe I believe it was you know, an incarnation of Devadatta, you know, because you know, seemed to be rebirth. Anyway, so he came along and he saw that the Monkey King was sitting there, a bit vulnerable position, holding onto the branch and stuff. And so he paused on the middle of the back of the Monkey King and said, gee, you know, bounced up and down a little bit, you know, give him a bit of a rough time. And so then it said that the Monkey King said to me, he says, I know you're competitive and you'd like to be in my position. So don't worry, I give you that because I can't hold on anymore. So I forgive you. And so he let go of the branch. The Devadatta monkey jumped onto the tree and he landed in the river and was eaten by the crocodiles. And of course, then he offered his body to the crocodiles. So he collected karma. Okay, karma generosity. But that's just one story of millions of the stories of Buddha Shakyamuni. So, in looking at him, in each rebirth, he cultivated something about himself, or in that case, it was generosity and being supportive of the family and such. Then there's, of course, a story where he was an aesthetic yogi, living in the forest, and he was practicing patience. It was his main practice in that rebirth. And so practicing patience. And then one day, the king of that part of the country came out with all of his courtesans and his wife, and they decided to have a party in his part of the forest. So they were off having a party and stuff, and it said the king got very, very drunk, and he was sort of carousing around and being silly and stuff like that, and finally fell asleep. Well, at that point then, his wife, the queen, was sort of, I'm a bit bored. My husband's, a drunk, so whatever. So she went wandering in the forest with her handmaidens, and they came across the yogi sitting there meditating. And so they did 3 prostrations, and they said, "Oh, great yogi, who are you and what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm a yogi, and I'm, working for enlightenment, and I'm practicing patience. That's what I'm doing this rebirth." And so then they sat there and they were taking teachings. Well, finally, the king woke up, and of course, then suddenly all his women are gone. And that's really bad. So he got really angry, and he grabbed his sword, and he's still drunk, and he ran around and everywhere. And he finally found, this man sitting under a tree with all of his women. So he ran up and "How dare you?" And he kicked him in the chest, knocked him down, and then chopped off his arms and his legs with his sword. And he said, "There you go, you can't touch my women." And of course, at that point, then his wife said, "What are you doing, you stupid husband of mine?" Okay. Anyway, and so she chastised him, and she says, "No, he's a monk, and he was, as a mendicant, he was teaching us, and this and that. You've made a big error, And so the Siddhartha, as this yogi, was lying on the ground, and his blood was sort of oozing out from his 4 limbs being cut off. And he said, "Oh, king, I tell you, if there's even a little bit of untruth in what I'm saying, may it not happen. But if I'm completely truthful, that I never felt any anger at you as you chopped my arms and legs off, may my limbs rejoin my body, and may my blood turn into milk." And then, everything, his limbs went back on, and all his blood everywhere turned into milk and stuff. And so, of course, then the king and the queen and everybody was very touched, and they did prostrations and they received teachings. But again, the story is our cultivation of our bodhicitta, rebirth by rebirth. Then the best story, and again, hey, I have you for an hour and a half, so don't be stressed, okay? Just relax and enjoy yourself. Okay, so the next story of Siddhartha, in the rebirth, was that he was a forester. And so he and his wife, and it said that his wife in that case was Yodhishara, again in their previous rebirths, and they lived in the forest, and he would collect firewood. He'd go off into the forest and chop firewood and collect it all, and then tie it on his back, and then walk to the village, because they lived in the forest. And then in the village, he would sell the firewood, and then he would buy his tortillas and his frijoles, every day. And then he'd walk back to the thing, and he'd give it to his wife and stuff, and she would cook it up and things like that. So that was, they did that. And then they would sit and pray and meditate together, because they were in a relationship. And that's the really important point, is that we shouldn't think that Buddha Shakyamuni as Siddhartha was always a monk or a nun. No, he was a lay person, he was a monkey, he was a bunny rabbit, come on, all sorts of stories. Anyway, so one day Siddhartha went off to collect firewood, but it was a really hot day, maybe like in Taos, New Mexico, like really hot. And he was out in the sunshine, and the mosquitoes were biting him, and it was just miserable. But he chopped his firewood, and then he went to the village, but nobody wanted his firewood. It was just like nothing was happening, it wasn't going to be a good day for him. So he was really like miserable, like, okay, I worked really hard, I chopped the firewood, I've done all this, okay, but hey, I'm going home because my wife will have the frijoles and tortillas waiting for me. Okay. So anyways, then he started to come back. Well, as he was doing that, it said that a very old, wizened, yogi, a mendicant, was wandering around the forest and was looking for begging. This is time for begging the midday meal. And so he came to the door of the little grass hut that Yogeshwara and Siddhartha lived in. And he looked in and he said, alms for the poor, please. And she said that she looked in his eye, which is the doorway to the soul. And she saw, wow, this guy is really pure, like such a pure man. So she took all the frijoles and gave it to him, and all the tortillas and gave it to him. And the old man said, thank you very much, and then he scurried off to the edge of the clearing of their little forest, place. And anyways, he started eating it. Well, at that time, then of course, Siddhartha came back, hot, tired, mosquito bitten, just actually quite miserable. And he arrived and he looks in the little hut that they have, and there's his wife smiling at him with great joy, but all the cooking pots are empty. And he goes that, and then he looks over and there's this dirty old man, an old crippled man eating his tortillas and frijoles, and he lost it. He dropped his firewood off his back, and he turned to his wife and he said, how dare you? I worked so hard to get those frijoles and tortillas to you, and this and that, and you give them away to this dirty old man. This man, his skin is black and he's ugly and he's deformed, and he listed all these horrible things, like he's a cochino, and anyway, lots of Spanish words there. Okay. So he said all this, and so as he's doing this, ranting on and carrying on and swearing, cursing his wife and cursing this old man, his wife starts to pray, and she says, in a future rebirth, when my dearly beloved husband, who right now is really stupid, is going to take a rebirth with black skin and half crippled and ugly and hair all over his body and this and that, may I still meet him, may I still fall in love with him, and may we continue our Dharma practice. And so she's praying that. And at the same time, the old man at the edge of the forest, who of course is a great yogi of Mendicant, he started praying too. And he said, this poor man who's so upset about frijoles and tortillas, how pathetic, but okay. So, I say, may I help him, may I bring him into enlightenment, things like that. Anyway, and so at this point, Siddhartha suddenly goes like, whoa, his wife's praying, and the old man over there is praying, and he sort of goes, oh, gee, I made a boo-boo, I sort of think. So he said he sort of slowed down, and he made 3 prostrations to his wife first, because we all know that's really important. It's the week of the Day of Women, yeah. Okay. Anyway, so he did 3 prostrations to his wife and asked for please forgive me. He then went to the mendicant, did 3 prostrations, said, please forgive me. And so then it said that then the mendicant came over and he gave teachings to the Siddhartha and Yogeshwara for their path to enlightenment. But what I like about that story is that for those of us in relationships, so much it's sort of what we're getting from that person or what we didn't get from that person or something like that. It's not about having that bodhicitta heart. And what's really interesting with Mahayana Buddhism is that we're not, it's like, yes, you want to work on your attachments. Yes, you want to work on your anger, but you're going somewhere with yourself. It's not like you just abandon your delusions and say, no, I can't do that. The Hinayana Arhats, basically all they have to do is focus on the non-self existence of their sense of self, and they can become personally liberated because they realize their clear light nature of their sense of their self, of their sense of self. And that liberates them, and then it will not take a rebirth. So that's all they need to do. You have to have concentration and an investigative insight into the nature of reality of your personality, sense of self. And so you get liberated. But we're in the Bodhisattva vehicle. And so we cultivate ourselves. So we learn how to deal with our anger. We learn how to work with it and process it and such like that. And so that when anger comes up, we have technique to deal with it. And not just that. I mean, there's something I always, I find these statements where they say, oh, you have to love yourself. And I just find that sort of a little bit quaint, What I would say is this, and again, it's just my point of view. I'm not saying I'm accurate, but my point of view is that if, for example, you're an angry person, then say, I need to bring my anger into enlightenment. My anger is a suffering mind. It needs to be liberated. I need to help it get liberated. So I will, with compassionate and wisdom, I will bring my angry mind into enlightenment. Or if I'm attached, or if I'm I'm miserly, or whatever it might be, my delusion. Each one of those, may I bring them into enlightenment? May I help them be more enlightened? And then you use, the standard sort of techniques that you'd use in dealing with anger or something. But it's about perspective. That your anger, yes, it's an enemy. It makes bad karma, but we're bodhisattvas. And so when we work for the benefit of sentient beings, you have to have empathy and compassion and love. So when a sentient being is angry, it's like, you can't just sort of say, you're really making a big mistake. Anger is wrong. You're going to destroy all your virtues. That could work, and they might just get more angry because they think you're a jerk. Or you could say, wow, I used to be angry. It doesn't help very much, but yeah, I can understand why you're so upset. I empathize with you and I understand you. And I would like to help you become more enlightened. Now, whether you say all of that or not depends on the circumstance, because angry people aren't easy to talk to. So maybe you have to wait for a week or two. But the point is that you have love and compassion for them, like you had love and compassion for your own anger and your attachment and thing, because you brought those into enlightenment. So the same thing, bring your delusions into enlightenment, and you will have an automatic capacity to help other people do it, not in a judgmental way, but in an empathetic and heartfelt way, which makes you very attractive. One of the big things with His Holiness the Dalai Lama is you really feel he understands you. He's got that sort of a nature. I know him from when I met him, he was 35 years old. I was 20 and he was 35, and Lama Yeshe was 35. The two of them were the same age, And so, think about it, like 35-year-old Dalai Lama, wow, but he cultivated himself. And so, he does it with a lot of people. When he sees you, he says, oh, my old friend, and it just tears your heart out. He's so sweet. Anyway, so that's something that's because you could say, well, you see my dear old friend, or just he's very empathetic with you and you really feel connected to him. That's a quality. So anyway, I'm just sharing with you that that in the Mahayana, we have to have this attitude of bringing ourselves into enlightenment. But how do we do that? Well, we bring our delusions into a more enlightened position, that they're no longer functioning. Because it's not like, like this part of me is going to become enlightened, and this part of me over here is not going to become enlightened. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. You, who you are, become enlightened. So how does that happen? Well, you work on your delusions. That is Mahayana path. The Hinayana path, you just try to ignore them. You just don't try to, you try to avoid situations where they could come up. You meditate a lot. But in the Mahayana tradition, no, you work on yourself and try to develop abilities to deal with things. Because the better you have an ability to deal with yourself, the better you'll have ability to deal with somebody else. So you see, this is all part of spiritual determination. But what we're talking about is our inspiration with the Buddha. Like, the Buddha is wonderful. The Buddha is really worthy of great admiration and inspiration. And how can we understand how great the Buddha is because, okay, he walked in maybe 100 square mile of India, from Gaya through to Benares and maybe a few other places, but not much. Granted, he was around for 80 or 40 years after his enlightenment, but I don't know, he really got all over the place. But the thing is, from that, and no TVs, no cellulars, no newspapers, maybe word of mouth, and he affected India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Tibet, Mongolia, China, Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam. Just, you see what I mean? You have to have unbelievable karma to accomplish that. You and I, we go out in the street and we say, be virtuous, and people will laugh at us because we have no karma. Maybe one or two people might think about it. But the thing is that Buddha Shakyamuni, with none of the factors that we have nowadays, basically changed the whole of Asia, and it even went to Greece, but didn't get very far that direction. So really, like, Buddha Shakyamuni is like, wow, and the karma he had was wow, and and how can you say, why can you say wow? Because look how much he affected the world. That took incredible karma. Anyway, so we're talking about spiritual determination, we're talking about motivation, and we're just talking about the Buddha. Isn't that nice? It's just not too complicated, not a lot of like heavy duty, like mind transformation things, just getting in touch with our feelings and what could really inspire us and move us. Okay. So so for motivation, and for all of us, you know, who we are, I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm 72 now, and I can see most of you we're all sort of similar age group, pretty much. You know, so we're preparing for the end of life. You know, I mean, I must say I'm minimalizing. My older brother died at the age of 80, just actually last year, and his house was just full of stuff. And now his wife is really having a lot of suffering about how to deal with all the stuff that they accumulated. You know, which is okay, this happens, you know, but I don't know, just my wife now and I, we basically are minimalizing, we're minimalistic, you know, granted she's younger than me, but the thing is still, you know, get your life nice and tidy and everything like that. And then the really neat thing about it is that, you know, is all you have to do, you know, to practice generosity, all you have to do is write your will. You don't have to give anything away. But you write your will and say, well, this person, I love this person, I'm going to give him this, and I love that person, I'm going to give him that, and this and that. You know, you write everything out, you know, and stuff like that. And the neat thing is you don't have to do it, but it's there waiting for them, you know. And so when you look at it, you feel good. Like I've got a very fancy computer. It's got a really high-end processor and a really high-end video card. And I've got it aimed at one of my nephews who likes video games. You know, I don't use it that way, but the thing is, I think, wow, he's going to be so stoked with that, you know. It's a really top of the line computer, you know. And then I have my car, you know, my car is pretty new. So again, I can think, wow, you know, someone else can get that, you know, and I feel, wow, I feel happy about that. You know, so in that way, you know, when you look at the items you have, and I'm talking about us, for most of us, I don't see anybody much younger than that you can do that. And you can feel good about the things you see. Now, what was really interesting is my older brother, John, you know, I went to see him in November. So he died in January of 2022. So I saw him in November of 2021 when he was still, you know, conscious and very much, you know, we could still have good conversations. I spent a week with him. Anyway, and so what happened was he had this very nice vintage car. It was a Toyota pickup truck, but it was a really very nice one. He said he used to be able to, you know, drive around and you'd drive into a parking lot or something and park, and then people say, hey, I like your truck, you know, really nice, you know. So it's like, yes, it was vintage, you know, I mean, really neat old truck. Anyway, so he's lying on his bed, you know, he's got pancreatic cancer and stuff like that. And he says, Jhampa, I don't know who I could give my truck to because they won't take care of it. You know, I thought, gee, you know, come on. I mean, you know, I mean, I can appreciate, you know, like, I mean, he values his truck. You could say attachment, but the thing is, it hung him up. It took him 3 days to come to a conclusion about who he could give it to, that he would feel good about that. And I mean, for me, it was a great lesson. I think, like, wow, you know, I mean, what do I have that I'm sort of, you know, I want them to take care of it, you know, I want them to value it. Like I valued it. I want them to do that. And if they don't, I'm going to be really unhappy. I'm going to roll over in my grave. You know what I mean? Like, isn't it funny? You know. Anyway, so I think that again, in regards to, you know, our life and things, and for example, feeling good about who you are, you know, write a really good will and stuff. And then actually a little side trick, which actually my brother did, is if you have Google or Yahoo, you know, account, you go in your draft section. And you write letters to all the people that you really value. But and so the heading it is I've died. And underneath that, you write about how beautiful they were, how much you love them, or how much they're meaning for you, this and that. But you don't send it. But one of your friends, who's hopefully younger, doesn't die before you, knows about this. So when you do die, they go into your computer, they go to your drafts, and they you know, check mark them all, send. And then all those people that maybe you didn't have a chance to say, I love you and I care for you and you're really beautiful, they get a message. Isn't that cute? Isn't that nice? I mean, I only have 8 right now, but they're for the people that I really value. I could actually increase on that a little bit. Just I'm lazy, but the point is it's still. So I'm just sharing little thoughts about stuff because, you know, we're still in motivation, spiritual determination, the meaning of our life, and such. So that's sort of the start of this Dharma discourse. Okay. Now, having got to that point, I'd like to open it to questions, because I mean, I've talked to you for now 45 minutes, isn't it? And you know, hopefully I've entertained you a little bit, but I'd like you to be able to ask questions. So please, if you have questions, type them into the chat, or if you want to put your hand up. I mean, there's only what, 11 of us, and I can see everybody. So if I see their hand up, I'll say your name, and then you can talk. But if you want, just type or talk as you wish. It's open for questions. You know, there's it's called the window of opportunity. So right now the window of opportunity is open, but it's not always open. So take advantage. Okay, Willis. Willis is waving his hand.
Oh yeah, well, okay, no questions. Just wow, all you've shared with us is really very, very inspiring, and thank you. Anyway, I don't know what to ask at this point. That's where I'm at anyway.
Well, I say we're at the point where like we want to feel good about it, good about life when we die. I mean, it's going to be very unpleasant to die. No one's going to like it. But the thing is, it's really important to feel good about when you look at your wife, your husband, or your partners, or your children, or your pet dog, or whatever, that you can say, hey, I was a good person in that person's life, or in my pet's life. That's what we want to feel, you know. So anyway, thank you, Willis.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, you guys are okay. Mary Jo, you got your fingers, you got two fingers up. You have to turn on your microphone. We can't hear you yet.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So one question really. I would like if you could just speak a little bit more about how you formulate a sentence, how that is being important. I'm not sure that I caught the essence of that.
Okay, I missed it. I missed it. Just one more time. Say what it was.
Please, could you speak a little bit more about how you formulate a sentence being important?
The sentence? I don't know. I don't catch that word.
Sentence, S-E-N-T-E-N-C-E, sentence.
Oh, sentence?
Or thought, or yes.
How do you, okay, so the question is, how do you make your thoughts important? I'm sorry.
How you formulate your thoughts being very important. You spoke quite early on about that, and I'm just not sure that I caught it all.
Well, the way we think is the way that we create our attitude, and the way we have our attitude is the way we then experience our life. So there's sort of a progression of the way I think over a period of time will create my attitude, my feelings, and then that will then create the way I experience my life. So that's why we have the different texts. I mean, whether it's the 37 practices of all Buddha's sons, or 8 thoughts of attitude transformation. I mean, these are the texts which really are the ones which are, I think, important in the Mahayana point of view of cultivating ourselves in a certain direction. I think what I mentioned was that as if we are, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years into our Dharma practice, sometimes it gets flat. And the reason it gets flat is because we're not conscious enough of our motivation, that we're not really recognizing it. We're sort of saying our prayers out of memory rather than out of really getting connected to them. And I speak about myself. I mean, that's me. I mean, that's why I talk about it, is because I realize, oh, I'm really not feeling this very much. So that's just one thought. The other side, though, as time's passed, I've found that feelings are really important. Thoughts are good, but when feelings come into play, it's a more holistic experience and such. So having a thought and then mixing it with a feeling that's positive and going in a good direction makes it more powerful. Okay, so how about that? Is that, I hope, Mary Jo, that sort of gives you some thoughts. Can't hear you. You got yourself muted still, but it's okay.
Sorry. How is it that we attune a sort of like switch into our feeling realm?
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, for example, by association with somebody, or let's say you have a pet dog or cat or something, by association, your thoughts then get created with feelings, mixed with feelings, and it's through association. So the same thing, I mean, may all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. That's a bunch of words, but then you try to think about, well, you know, may my neighbor be happy, may the person on the street be happy, may, you know, a very good one is when you go to the grocery store and there's someone there doing the clerk. I mean, now of course there's a lot of self-serve, but I think if you do have a cashier at the service counter of your grocery store, when you look at them and you say, may they have happiness and the cause of happiness, because they're standing there for 8 hours a day. You know, wow, you know, I mean, may they be free of suffering, may they have happiness. But when you have that thought, feelings will then gather around it. So the cultivation of feelings comes from the way we think, and by familiarity. And with that, then we start having stronger feelings. So for example, the Dalai Lama is a great example. I mean, when he talks about compassion, he's got all those thoughts, for example, of the Chinese that have done so much damage to Tibet. He has compassion for them. He's not angry. He doesn't sit there and say, oh, those, you know, so-and-so Chinese who ruined my country and they cut all our forests down. No. He just says, wow, I mean, this is samsara, and they had a misunderstanding. They've done a lot of damage. They are truly worthy of my compassion. So it's the way you think that then will create the feelings, okay?
Yes.
Okay, Sarah, you have your...
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I have a question. I think it's interesting what you're saying, that we should feel the prayers as we're saying them. Because I've on YouTube and various other internet platforms, I see the monks in Tibet reciting their pujas, their mantras, and they are going a mile a minute. I can't even, they're going so fast, I can't even learn the mantra from them. I thought that was the way it was supposed to be. It was more or less fast and rote and without emotional connection.
Well, you know, yes, I mean, I've memorized lots of prayers and I can do them on that level too. But when it comes down to personally who I am, I would rather slow it down and be in touch with my feelings. You know, that I just, so yeah, that like the Tibetans, they and it's funny that the Tibetans way is always bopping. Even the Dalai Lama does it, you know, it's always a sort of slightly rocking forward, back and forth, you know, and I do it too, you know, when I'm teaching. Right now I'm in a chair, so I don't do it too much, but yeah, there's sort of this thing. And this is sort of some of the Tibetan stuff, okay? And a lot of it, because they memorize a massive amount of their prayers, so it is sort of like, they're doing it from memory, and so they're into their memory and their body is bouncing back and forth, and they do it fairly quickly because they've got it memorized. But that doesn't mean that's the way you transform yourself, but that's just something that they do culturally and whatever. You know, I can think of many lamas. I mean, Lama Zopa does things very, very slowly. Lama Yeshe did it too. You know, the good teachers slow things down. And you know, and that's why for me, for example, I really like us to do our prayers in English because it's meaningful for us. I mean, chanting it in Tibetan, unless you know Tibetan, it's not so meaningful because you really don't know what you're saying. So are you really accumulating karma? So it's about accumulating karma. And when your feelings are involved, then you could say there's a stronger facet of karma being accumulated. You know, I'll give you an easy example. I mean, when you hear a teacher who really has some feelings about what they're talking about, it affects us, it stimulates us. It's not like we should practice the Buddha Dharma because it's very beneficial for us and we will be more happy in our future rebirths. Isn't that nice? You know, that's sort of like a dead meat, you know, it's nothing. I mean, watch a YouTube video of Lama Yeshe. He laughed and he exuded all this incredible energy, you know. So, you know, just allow ourselves to be more in touch with our feelings. And you know, that makes you a richer person. Like, you know, when you're, I don't know, some of your family members come home to visit you, Sarah. I mean, you know, when you say, oh, it's so nice to see you, and it's about love in your heart and joy to see them, they go, wow, you know, whereas it's nice to see you. I mean, come on, that's, you know what I mean? So the same in our Dharma practice, we want feelings in our Dharma practice, you know, and I think that's a sign that maybe we're getting more connected to them. Anyway, so just a thought. I mean, everyone's different. Some people are very intellectual, so maybe it won't happen too much. Okay. So, I mean, it's still a little bit of opportunity. The windows are closing, but okay. So I'm sorry, the windows are closed now. You can't ask any more questions. Sorry, too late. Okay, now we were talking about spiritual determination, and we want to emphasize it's going somewhere with ourselves. It's not renunciation, which is looking backwards, like I renounce this, I renounce that. No, I'm going somewhere with myself. And so that's a very important component, again, in the psychology of how we're affecting ourselves, you know, because it's just that. It's just, how am I affecting myself by the words I use in my spiritual practice? Okay, so that's the first thing. In regards to, you know, I talked about the rebirths of Buddha Shakyamuni and making it more full, because that has to do with, again, spiritual determination. Buddha Shakyamuni's spiritual determination over many, many rebirths and such. And then also for us, you know, that to take that into consideration, that we don't need to think that we should get rid of this and rid of that. Like, I wish I didn't have that person in my life because they're just a big bother. No, I mean, then where's our bodhicitta? Not that we need to invite problematic people into our life, but, you know, we do need to have a sense of inclusiveness, that we're together with, we're all working together towards a more enlightened thing. And then that's our quality. That's who we are and what we offer to a relationship. Okay, so spiritual determination. Now, the next thing, and this is actually, Sarah, this is feelings, okay? So Tara Rinpoche, when he came to Duncan, like maybe 35 years ago or something like that, and gave some teachings, and he talked about using our imagination in developing our feelings in our spiritual practice, okay? And so he talked about, so he shared that, and he talked about the precious human rebirth. Now, I'm assuming you're all reasonably well educated. I mean, there's the precious human rebirth, there's the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments, of which then there's the examples and such like that are sort of make you think about it. And then there's the questions, you know, am I really taking advantage of my precious human rebirth? Which is sort of like is pushing you, you know, to say, hey, you know, which for some people is good, some people are really lazy. But the thing that I like to do is, and this is from Tara Rinpoche, he said, okay, let's just say this is a winning lottery ticket. It's worth $2 million. You just got it and it won. It's the real thing. Now think about your feelings, like, ooh, wow, you know, like I can pay off some debts. I can give some money to my family members that need it. Maybe I could pay for one of my younger people to go to college, university, you know, because that's $2 million. Maybe it needs to be $5 million. 2 million isn't much enough anymore. So like, wow, you know, and excitement, you know, and so why? Potentiality. You can do so many good things with that money. So it's excitement, like, wow, you know. And then on top of it, you know, let's say, for example, you know, I mean, it's a week or 2 weeks later, or whatever, you have the money in the bank or whatever like that. It's not like that you get out of bed and you think, oh, I have to spend money today. Oh, so I'm so sad. I have to spend money. Come on, you know, and it'd be like, wow, what can I do today? You know, I mean, I could do something. I've got liberty. I've got opportunity. I can do some nice stuff, you know. Wow. So when you talk about our rebirth, make it, I won the lottery ticket of a precious human rebirth. So when you wake up in the morning, you feel excited about your life. It's like, yeah, I have a story. Okay, so here in Mexico, I was teaching in the city of Durango. And in Durango, there was one boy that came, this is a long time ago, like I guess 18 years ago, and he had juvenile onset arthritis. So he comes hobbling into the Dharma group where he's going to talk, and he has to sit in a chair, and he sits down and has so much he's pain, you know, it's really, he's about 20 years old. And he told me when he was 18, he got juvenile onset. He was in, you know, ended up playing guitar and in a band and stuff, all that had to stop. His one arm withered and became, fixed. He couldn't move it anymore. The other arm was reasonably moving and stuff. And anyway, so he came to the class, and over the next few weeks, and I talked about, the lottery ticket. We won a lottery ticket of a precious human rebirth. So he went home, and I gave everybody a piece of paper that said I won, or something like that. And he went home and he took it and he glued it to the ceiling above his bed. So every morning when he woke up, he saw that he had won the perfect human rebirth. And so he started to shift his attitude. It was very touching. I mean, I was really moved to hear his story, and he started to get out of bed, and he said, like, I have opportunity. I mean, maybe I'm marginally crippled, but I have got opportunity. And he really believed it, and he changed his attitude. So when I first met him, he was angry, just angry and unhappy, and, don't be, like you're just defensive and all these sorts of emotions that you might have, because he's 21 years old. He was reasonably handsome, but he was crippled. Anyway, so he changed his attitude. And then a few years later, the Relic Tour, the Maitreya Project Relic Tour came around. And so he volunteered to be one of the people there. And so he's at the greeting line or something like that. And this girl came in and they got talking. And so suddenly there's sort of something sparked up there. And lo and behold, later he got married. So from being crippled and I'm so unhappy. And I mean, I really am touched that he glued it to the ceiling of his bedroom. And every morning he'd wake up and that's what he would see. That's meaningful. That's powerful, It's not like I wait, well, anyway, it's just so, with ourselves, I mean, if you just try to start seeing your life as you did win the lottery ticket. So even if, like, I'm 72 years old, if I won the lottery, it's not like I'll say, oh, I'm too old to take advantage of this. No, I mean, wow, I could give some money to my older brother. I have two older brothers, one died. I would help the Dharma Center buy the house that we're in, then I would help. There's a nephew I have that's going to school. I like to go into school. I'd be so excited with this. Hey, what can I do for these guys, So the using our emotions and feelings is beneficial, because it's and then you're happy. And then think about the people in your life that say, what happened to you? What drug are you on? Because you're happy. You say, because I want, we can't really say it. I mean, what you could say is, well, I meditate. And they say, oh, really? And then you say, well, I meditate on Buddhism. Okay. And then you maybe get more right. You say, I do mindfulness meditation and it changed my life, So then you slowly hook them into being Buddhist. Okay. It depends on where you live in the audience. But the point is that if you're exuding happiness and excitement about your life, even, like you're 72 or whatever, it's infectious. People pick up on it and stuff. Anyway, so just the sort of concluding thing that I wanted to touch on was that part of spiritual determination is the graduated path to enlightenment. And one of it is that we get excited about our rebirth. Okay, so if you want, I mean, you could, buy a lottery ticket of whatever sort. Of course, you'll lose because they all do. But then you say, no, this is my precious human rebirth lottery ticket, and put it somewhere where you notice it, so that then you get excited when you wake up in the morning. Okay, and like I say, he was crippled. He needed his sister to help him get out of bed. He needed crutches. He ended up there. He's mostly in a wheelchair nowadays. But he's good energy, and I'm actually I have some idea of how much pain he's in, because the joints all get really stiff, and so I used to go there and I'd pick him up in my car, and so he'd have to sort of get himself. He actually had a chair with wheels on it, so you get into that, he would scurry over like where you get close to the thing, and then he'd move one of the arms of the chair up, and you get close to the seat, and then he would sort of like shift over and he'd get into the seat. And you could see he was in pain, didn't say a word, didn't complain. I was so touched, you know. So anyway, so this is a story for you. It's part of our spiritual determination, in the sense that we have a precious human rebirth, get excited about it, feel happy about it, even if we can't do a heck of a lot. Hey, still, you know, we got potentiality. We can do something. We can, when someone comes in, we can say hello. You know, actually, what's really intriguing in Mexico is like when you go into a dentist office or any of those sorts of offices, all the Mexicans say hello to you. You know, and I mean, come on, we know. I mean, I'm Canadian. You walk in a dentist office, everybody's ignoring you. They got a magazine in their face, you know, like that. They don't want to talk to you, you know. Whereas in Mexico, they have hola, hola. You know, they actually don't really go much further than that, but it is warm, you know. I mean, so we can do that, you know, when someone comes to visit, you know, don't just ignore them, but say hello, how are you, or just oh hi, nice to see you, you know, something light. So again, that's just a little bit of our joy that we're sharing with others. Okay, so I think that's about it. That's where I'd like to stop because you know, I've got other things I want to talk about, but I gave you a fair bit of material to chew on and think about. So I think best to stop now. Any questions before we quit?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah.
Well, this is more in, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is more in line of a comment. I'm assuming you're doing all your teaching in Spanish, correct?
No, I still use a translator because my grammar is not good enough.
Okay, well, I think it's just wonderful that you're bringing the Dharma to these people. My God, they're so lucky that they can
Well,
hear the Dharma.
I say Catholics are really good to work with because they become really good Buddhists.
I'll bet, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, big hugs. Yes, Mary Jo.
Yes,
Oh,
I think it's so wonderful that you're bringing this perspective to us. And thank you so much. It's very nice.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, all of us, I mean, myself included, it's sort of, I want to feel good about my life. So that's part of the stimulation is that I don't want to die thinking I didn't do enough. I want to die feeling that I was okay. So,
Yeah,
I
good.
have a question.
yeah, Laura.
Yes, I agree. I really have enjoyed your teaching. It's very down to earth. And you know, it's really, I can really relate to the way you're presenting the material, your thoughts. So thank you. And what the question I had was, so spiritual determination is a decision to move forward in your life with motivation, whereas renunciation is different in that it's more or less looking backwards or looking at it from the perspective of letting go of it, or how is that more or less the difference between those two?
Yeah, well, for me, like, okay, I mean, just take a couple of things. Like, I renounced alcohol, you know, okay. I mean, so there's alcohol and there's actually a water, but I renounced it, you know. So you really are looking backwards. Now, maybe, you know, you've moved forward because you've renounced it, but the emphasis is you've been looking backwards. Whereas spiritual determination, you know, so what if you gave up alcohol? You're going somewhere with yourself. So it's not like that you're carrying those things with you, you know, in your mind saying, oh, I renounce this, I renounce that. No, I mean, I've got somewhere I'm going. Now, it works very often to say renunciation in Dharma teachings because it fits. But really, we want to say, we recognize that we're going somewhere with ourselves. And that has a different, I think the big thing is, it's about who am I and how am I affecting myself? I am spiritually determined. It's not what I've given up, it's where I'm going.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm thirsty. Okay, so other questions or commentaries?
Good point. Thumbs up.
Okay, thumbs up. Yes. Good. Well, nice to be with you guys. So just in conclusion, it's great to meet you all. And you know, we're all like I say, I had no idea what my audience would be, but hey, we're pretty much all in the same age group. We all grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I think. You know? So we have a lot of generational connections there, which is good. So great. Maybe next time I'll share some of the stories just for fun, because you know I was born 1950. By the time I was 1968, so it was the end of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and you know, I mean, all of you know, all that. Then I ended up, you know, I was unhappy with my life in Canada, so I ended up, you know, selling everything I had. I didn't have a lot, but I had a bit, and getting a one-way ticket to England, and then I ended up going all the way through, you know, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, which was still peaceful, and down into India. And then I met the Dharma, and so I just turned 20 years old at that point. So anyway, interesting, that thing. But hey, that's for another time. Let's debate you for next week. I'll tell you stories. Okay, good. So I think that's it.
Very well, thank you.
I don't know what dedication prayers you'd like to do, but we'll do some sort of dedication. Actually, Louisa, you're do it.
I'll do it. Yes. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Venerable One, to use kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West. Mindful of your loving concern for us and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. May our venerable Lama's lives be firm, their white divine actions spread in the 10 directions, and the torch of Losang's teachings, dispelling the darkness of the three worlds beings, always remain. In all future lives, may we never be parted from the perfect Lamas and pure ways of the Dharma. May we gain every experience of the path and stages, and quickly achieve Vajradhara enlightenment. Thank you so much,
So,
Jhampa.
air hug.
Back.
Hug back and many
Thank you.
thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
Thank you so much, Jhampa. We look forward to next week.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.